It's been a little while since I did a video. Sorry about that. Just been really busy studying Revelations. I wanted to share with you a couple things. The first thing I want to talk about when John wrote the book of Revelations. And in chapter 22, verse 8, John said, I saw these things and heard them, and when I heard them, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel that showed me these things. Then he says to me, see that you do not do that, for I am a fellow servant, and of the brethren the prophets, and them which keep the sayings of this book, worship God. Well, one thing I notice, just studying Revelations over and over and over and over and over and over and over, is after the seven seals that are in Revelations, everything after that, it'll say something, and then it'll say something else, and then it'll say something that referred to the first thing. And everything just kind of blends like this. And for example, in Revelations chapter 21, it says, it is done. It's done. Well, if it's done, why did it say it is done in chapter 16? It says it is done. You can't say it's done and then in chapter 21 say it's done. Well, then that means the first one wasn't. So they match up is what I'm trying to say. So it all kind of comes together. And so I'm wondering, with John writing about worshiping the angel, and the angel says, don't do that, I'm of the brethren. Well, I'm sure if John made that mistake, he's not going to make the same mistake again. And so here is another example of, I think that it is the same story he's told twice, and they merge together, and it only happened one time. And that would be, the first one was Revelations 22:8. The other one is Revelations 19:10. And I just want to share that so you see the whole picture. He says, and I fell down at the feet and worshipped him that said unto me, see that you do not see that you do not do that. I am of the fellow servant and of the brethren, and that have the testimony of Jesus, worship God. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So there again, it's the same story being told that blends together. But I find it also interesting that the Lord had somebody who lived previously come back and give him a message. And I think that is pretty cool. And the reason why I think that also is when King Saul, the first king of Israel, he would be in 1 Samuel, but where he, the Lord wasn't talking to him anymore. He says, I'm done with you. You are not doing what you're told. You're trying to please the people. You're not here to please me. And he wanted to give the kingdom over to King David, which he wasn't a king yet. But it was after he had slayed the giant, and many years had gone by, but King Saul was jealous of David. And the Lord wasn't talking to Saul anymore. So in 1 Samuel chapter 28, it says that, now Saul, just to give you an example, Saul didn't allow any of the people that wizardry, witchcraft, familiar spirits to do anything in Jerusalem. He had sent them off, and they all went to Endor. That was the area that the witchcraft had started and is still there today. But King Saul wasn't getting any guidance of what he should do, so he goes to a woman who had a familiar spirit, and he asked for her to conjure up Samuel, the prophet. And I think that's quite interesting. And again, it matches what I had just read with John falling down at the feet of the angel. He says, no, don't do that. I'm of the brethren. So it's interesting how they come back and they give a message. And so now Samuel was dead, but this woman who had a familiar spirit from Endor, Saul disguised himself and went in because he told everybody, we don't do this, and then now he's doing it. And she right away said, why have you done this? Because she realized the familiar spirit in him knew it was Saul, King Saul. So she was afraid of her life. But he said, I need you to bring up Samuel. And the woman saw Samuel, and she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, what have you done? You've deceived me. You are Saul. And I thought that was interesting. There again, it's somebody that had passed away and that came back to give a message. And actually, Samuel was not... Now, this is what it's saying. It could have been, God had departed from me, and he answered me no more. That's why the Lord had departed from him, and he had gone to this woman with a familiar spirit. So now, sometimes I wonder, did she actually bring up Samuel? I mean, even though John had thought it was an angel, and he says, no, I'm of the brethren. Now, this being, I don't know, but it kind of goes together. Whether it was a demon that came up and looked like Samuel, I don't know. But I think it's kind of interesting that John had seen the brethren, and now he's asking him to bring up Samuel. So I think with the dark side, they can be deceived. But anyway, that was something I wanted to share. You can look that stuff up yourself. But the other thing I wanted to share, and this is one of my favorite verses, it's Malachi chapter 3 and verse 16. Then they that fear the Lord spoke often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it, and the book of remembrance was written before him that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. Well, first of all, what's interesting is feared the Lord. People go, why do you fear the Lord? It actually in the Greek and the Hebrew means reverence. So it says, him that reverenced the Lord and thought upon his name. The Lord made up a book of remembrance. Isn't that cool? And they shall be mine, says the Lord, in that day when I make up my jewels. And I will spare them as a man spares his own son that serves him. Then they shall return and discern between, then shall he return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serves God and him that serves him not. And I thought, wow, how neat that the God of the universe that made everything wants to make a book about us, that just because we reverence him and think on his name, he wants to put us in a book. And he wants to give us jewels. Is that not cool? I think that is amazing. That just shows how awesome and wonderful and so much grace and mercy that he has on us. And he loves us so much that he wants to bestow on us. It reminds me of a story. It's been a while since I've heard the story, so I'll try to share it as best as I can remember. But there was a man, he had died. He later came back to tell the story, but he had died and he found himself in heaven. Well, he was standing there with a stack of books, and the man next to him was a pastor, a well-known evangelist on TV that he had recognized. And he was not dead, but he was there. And he had a stack of books. And then next to him was an elderly lady with gray hair and a bun, and she had a stack of books. Well, Jesus walks up to each one of them. Now, the stack of books represents their life, and whether they have worked for the Lord or not. And he touches the pastor's books, and they turn to ashes. And Jesus just shakes his head in disappointment. And then he goes over to the elderly lady with the bun and the gray hair, and he touches her books, and they turn to jewels. And then he says the next thing he remembered is that he was by the throne room. And Jesus was sitting on the throne, and all these, things were going on. And the Lord came off of his throne, and he walked up to them again. And this time he noticed that each of them had a second stack of books. So Jesus walks up to the pastor and touches his books, and they turn to ashes again. And Jesus just shakes his head in disappointment. And then he says to the man, "It's not your turn yet. It's not your time yet." And then he goes to the elderly lady next to him, and he touches her books, and they turn to liquid gold. He says then he sees Jesus kneeling down doing something, and then he realized that Jesus took her gold and her jewels and made her a crown. And he stood up, and it's like he formed the crown with his hands. And he stood up and he put it on her head and said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So I thought that was neat. I like that story. That the God of the universe loves us so much that he just wants to bestow blessings on us. Anyway, I thought I would share that. That's one of my favorite stories that I like to read. All right. Thanks.